In the heart of the galaxy, a light trembled. The Astronomican beacon of mankind, burning with the psychic agony of 10,000 souls, flickered across the void. Ships shuddered in silence. Navigators clutched at their skulls as blood wept from blind third eyes. On Terra, 1,000 astropaths screamed before falling still, their bodies twisted into ashen relics. And somewhere beyond the veil of time, a presence stirred. The throne was weakening. The God Emperor, eternal corpse of golden light, shifted, if only slightly, in the dark cradle of the imperial palace. And in that instant, across the infinite weave of fate and failure, something else awoke. But before we descend into shadow and memory, know this.
We tell this story with care, for it is yours, and it matters. No matter where you are in the world, or how far from terror you feel, we are with you. You are part of this great tale.
So before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? And what time is it there? Now, grab your coffee and let's get started. He stood upon the basalt cliffs of Terra's outermost shrine moon. Eyes turned toward a sun that no longer burned like it once did. The wind was artificial here, thin, humming with ionized prayer chant. Even the breeze was manufactured faith. Lord Kalan of the Obsidian Order, once man, now something else, watched as the distant pulse of the Astronomican faltered and blinked like a dying heart. He said nothing. His breath did not fog in the cold, for he had not drawn true breath in 1,000 years. Around him, the ruins of an observatory crumbled with every tremor. Once, this place had charted stars. Now it charted endings. A servo skull hovered close, relaying binary psalms from Terra. Astronomican in stasis flux. Inquiry. Lord Cullen awaiting order. He ignored it. Beneath his armored hands, the obsidian railing cracked. His gauntlets, black ceramite, etched with runes so old they'd been outlawed, tightened. He remembered when the Astronomican first lit the heavens. He had stood beside the Emperor that day, not as an equal, never that, but as a trusted sentinel, an anchor. That had been his purpose, long ago, to watch, to wait, to act only when all else failed. It was failing now. A whisper passed through his mind, not in words but feeling, a shudder of despair, a call for help from across the warp. The Emperor's will no longer shielded mankind. It merely delayed the inevitable. And with that flicker of weakness, something else bled through. Something old, something forgotten. He turned from the crumbling platform, cloak trailing through ash and snow. In the ancient tongue of forgotten orders he murmured, "Protocol Solstice." The servo skull word then activated a coded sequence that had not been used in over 9,000 years. Somewhere deep within Luna, a cryptic vault unsealed. The chamber was dark when he arrived, miles below the surface. Under strata of black ice and steel, the vault of vigilance groaned awake. Light sputtered to life. Sigils glowed crimson. Dust, older than the Imperium, shifted. Here lay the last contingency of Malkador the Sigillite. Callan entered slowly. He passed statues that wept blood, scriptures etched in living metal, and stasis tubes that held the remnants of the Emperor's oldest plans. He paused before a mirror of gold and bone. In it, he did not see himself. He saw a younger man, scarred, idealistic, eyes lit with purpose. The man he once was, a man who still believed the Imperium could be saved. He turned away. In the heart of the vault stood a reliquary. Within it a blade forged from blacklight and silver, humming with a sound only the soul could hear. Beside it a data tablet coded in the Sigillite's own hand. Its message was simple. "You will know when to return." Callan's fingers hovered above the hilt. Not yet. He left the blade where it was. Outside, as he emerged once more into the dying light, he saw them, ships, burning in the atmosphere. A star fort drifting off course. The warp storms grew bolder by the hour. But worse than all that was the silence, the absence in his soul, where once he had felt the Emperor's presence. A great fire behind every thought, there now lingered only embers. He looked upward, toward the palace, toward the throne. Kalan, immortal, oath-bound, the last sentinel of a forgotten order, stood in the twilight of mankind. He whispered, not a vow, but a question. Is this the end, or the beginning? Somewhere in the stars, something stirred in reply. It was not by war that the Imperium would fall, not by bolt or flame, nor daemon or heresy, but by silence. A silence that crept into the minds of saints and monsters alike. A silence that gnawed at the corners of thought, where once the Emperor's light had burned with holy violence. Callan had known such silence once before, when the Emperor had first fallen. That moment had nearly broken him.
This one was worse.
Luna was not what it once had been. Gone were the resplendent fortresses of the Emperor's loyalists, their white and gold banners long since torn by time. In their place stood black towers of stone and silence, where the living no longer walked freely, and only the echoes of old oaths remained. Kalan moved through the subsurface vaults like a phantom. No sentries challenged him. No rites halted his passage. The codes he carried were older than the palace itself. The vaults of the sepulchrum lay at the deepest point of Luna's shadow side, a sanctum buried in no lion and ancient grief. Few knew of it, fewer dared return. Here the Ordo Sepulchrum once catalogued every known failure of mankind. Broken relics, rogue psychers, and forbidden litanies too dangerous to burn. It was here he had sent her. Virella. He had not spoken her name in centuries, had not dared to. When the door of Hexeramite hissed open, it revealed a chamber choked with incense and low, droning hymns. The light was sickly, blue filtered through soul glass, and there, alone, amidst tomes and bones, stood a figure in crimson. She had not changed. Virella still wore the robes of the Ordo Sepulchrum, trimmed in faded white, though her armor now bore cracks in its purity seals. Her head was shaved in penance. Her eyes shimmered, not with faith, but fire long denied. She did not look up. You left me here. Cullen stepped forward. His voice echoed, low, metallic, shaped more by will than throat. I left you alive. That was not mercy, she whispered, turning slowly. Her face scarred now, but resolute, met his. It was cowardice. He did not deny it. A long silence passed between them, heavy with unspoken memories. The air tasted like ash and old betrayal. What do you want, Kalan? She asked at last. The Astronomican is faltering. The throne is no longer sealed, as it once was. Her eyes narrowed. Then it begins. He nodded. I need the sepulchral index, the old records, the contingency protocols Malkador bound in blood. She moved past him, robes whispering. And why should I give them to you? You abandoned those protocols. You broke your oath. You refused the call for 9,000 years. I waited, he said, quietly, because I was told to wait, because Malkador trusted me to act only when there was no other hope left. Virella stopped. And now hope is a memory, she sighed, a sound brittle as breaking glass. The records are sealed, some so deep they breathe when disturbed. You'll need more than clearance. You'll need conviction. He followed her into the deeper archive vaults. There, walls bled data across pulsing circuits of living stone. A stasis chamber flickered open, revealing a scroll sealed in skin, pulsing faintly. A psychic lock curled around it like a serpent, binding it with ancient guilt. You remember this? She asked. He did. The Codex Eramor. The final recording of the last navigators to attempt warp travel without the Astronomican. They had returned, changed. Some fused with their vessels, others bore eyes within their mouths. None could speak of what they saw. This is what's coming, she said. And you would face it alone? He looked at her then, not with power, but pain. Would you come with me? For a moment, the fire in her dimmed. You left me in the dark, Kalan, she said. When the galaxy burned and the Emperor's soul screamed across the warp, you turned away. I prayed, I begged, and you vanished. He bowed his head. There is no penance I can offer for what I failed to do. Only this, I did not stop believing. I only stopped knowing how. Varella's silence stretched long. Then, without a word, she reached into the archive and retrieved the codex. I will come, she said, but not for you, for them, for the dead, for the children who will never see Terra's light. She handed him the codex. Their hands brushed an old spark, long buried, flickered again. Do not ask me to forgive you, she said. I never will, he replied. Later, as they walked the broken halls of Luna together, the stars beyond flickered, not with the brilliance of the Astronomican, but with something colder, hungrier. Varela looked skyward. Have you heard them? The whispers, he asked. She nodded. They echo in the minds of the dying, not in low Gothic, not in words, just the promise of peace, an end to pain. They lie, Cullen said. Yes, but what if that lie is kinder than the truth? Cullen looked toward Terra, where the golden light faltered behind the clouds, and deep in his immortal soul, he felt something fracture. Some wars are not fought with weapons, but with memory. Not all betrayals are thunderous declarations of heresy. Some are quiet. Some are made in desperation, made for survival, and that is what makes them harder to forgive. Callan stood at the edge of Verelia Secundus, a fortress world once clad in banners of ivory and iron. It had been one of his own bastions, a world sworn to uphold the oaths of the Obsidian Order, defenders of forgotten truths, keepers of ancient vows. But now it stank of desperation. Orbiting above the planet were defense platforms cobbled from Mechanicus wreckage. Shield pylons sparked with unstable energy. The void channels hummed with encrypted transmissions, not sanctioned by Terra. Even from orbit, Callan could feel it. Something had changed here. They descended in silence. Virella stood beside him aboard the dropship, arms folded. Her gaze didn't leave the viewport as their vessel pierced the polluted clouds. Do they know you're coming? She asked. They'll know the moment they see me, he replied. And what will they do? Callan's jaw tensed. That depends on whether they still remember who they are. The dropship touched down on the landing spire of Bastion Zeros. Once, this place had housed oaths as sacred as the Codex Astartes. Now, its halls were choked with rust and strange symbols, sigils not written in any known Imperial dialect. Callan stepped forward, Varela at his side. Servo torches sputtered. Gun servitors tracked them from the shadows, but none fired. The gate opened. They were expected. At the heart of the throne room stood a figure in storm-grey armor, half shrouded in mist and a machine cable. His helm bore a cracked visor. His pauldron bore the sigil of the Obsidian Order, twisted now into a serpent devouring its own tail. Thesaurus! Callan knew him instantly, though millennia had aged his once proud form. Where Callan had become still as a monument, Zaris had grown wild with time. You look as dead as ever, Zaris said, voice like gravel and oil. Callan stopped several paces from the dais. You broke the oath.
The Maxaris laughed bitterly. Did I? Or did I simply keep it in a world that no longer honors it?
He descended the stairs slowly, the servos in his armor whining. You vanished, left us to rot. While the Imperium collapsed, I held this world together with blood and ash. Callan, while you hid behind your long silence, Lorella stepped forward, voice sharp. You aligned with forbidden technologies. The psalm cores in your vox arrays are Zinus. I can smell the corruption. Theras ignored her. His eyes remained on Callan. They were dying, he said. Famine, plague, warp storms. I begged for reinforcements. Terra sent none. The ecclesiarchy demanded tithes. The Mechanicus offered alternatives. What would you have done? I would not have made a deal with the ruinous powers, Callan said, quiet but cold.
No. You who served an emperor who devoured 1,000 psychers a day. Spare me your hypocrisy.
The room trembled faintly. The lights flickered. You don't feel it, do you? Xerxes said, stepping closer. You don't feel the void press in. I do. Every hour, every moment. It's already here. The warp storms don't wait. I had to choose, and I chose survival. And what did you sacrifice for it? Callan asked. Asurus's expression cracked. He stepped aside, revealing the great reliquary at the center of the throne room, once a sanctum of imperial doctrine. Now it pulsed with a faint, rhythmic glow. Suspended in a field of stasis was something. It was a creature, or it had been, twisted and eyeless. Veins of silver and black ran through its flesh like cables, warp-born, perhaps, but restrained. Its very presence made the air vibrate. What is it? Virella whispered. Our salvation, Xerxes answered, or our final mistake. It fell from the stars. It whispered in riddles. It taught us how to keep the planet safe. No warp incursions. No daemonic breaches. No psychomutations in over a century. It's feeding on the people, isn't it? Callan said. Xerxes didn't answer.
That was the betrayal, then.
Not of loyalty, not even of faith, but of desperation. A slow erosion of purpose, one compromise at a time. You still have a choice, Callan said. I already made it. Xerxes replied. They stared at each other a moment longer. Time stretched between them like a cracked mirror. Then Xerxes did something strange. He removed his helm. His face was tired. Scars crisscrossed his cheeks. His eyes, once bright with devotion, were sunken and hollow. Don't kill it, he said, voice raw. Not yet. Let me show you what it's protecting. Let me prove to you that this world still deserves to be saved. Callan looked at Virella. She gave him nothing, only waited. Then, quietly, Callan nodded. You have until dawn. That night, they walked the corridors of Virelia Secundus, through districts rebuilt with strange tech, through communities kept in order by song and ritual Callan didn't recognize. They saw children laughing, soldiers drilling, a world surviving, and in the corner of every shadow they felt it, watching. By the time they returned, the creature had spoken again. Not aloud, not in any voice. It spoke into their thoughts, and what it said was simple. The Emperor's dream is dead, but you may yet build a new one if you surrender your fear. Callan stared into its eyeless gaze, and for the first time in 10,000 years, he did not know what he believed. The warp does not speak in words. It sings, and like all songs, it can be heard by those who truly listen, those who've been broken just enough to hear beyond the veil. They departed Virelia Secundus before dawn.
Xerxes remained behind, standing in the silence of his own choice, face half-shadowed by the unblinking gaze of the creature in his throne. He had given Callan the last fragment of data he possessed, coordinates to a site no living psyker dared approach.
A place where minds unravel, the soul well. It lay far beyond the border worlds of Segment and Tempestus, nestled in a debris field where once a black ship had vanished without trace. The Astra Telepathica had buried it in redacted memory, classified under protocols even Inquisitors feared to invoke. The warp there was thin, like paper over flame, too thin. But the Emperor's flame was faltering, and in such places the old echoes returned. Their ship, Eidolon's remnant, slipped through the storm-sheared void, guided by half-mad servitors chanting lost star maps. Virella kept vigil in the cathedral chamber at the ship's center, lighting candles whose flames danced in rhythm to the Astronomican's fading pulse. Kalan stood alone on the bridge. Stars flickered like dying embers. The war howled softly beyond the Geller fields. Yet, something beckoned them forward. When they reached the graveyard of the Soul Well, the void opened like a wound. Wreckage drifted in slow spirals. Burnt hulls of black ships, etched with charred prayers. Shattered astropathic spires, still humming with the last thoughts of the dead. And in the center, a hollow moon, split in half like a skull, its core exposed and gleaming with raw psychic light. "This place is wrong," Virella whispered as they descended into its fractured orbit. Kalan said nothing. He felt it too. The Soul Well was not truly a place. It was a resonance, an echo caught between life and memory. They entered its depths aboard a modified lander, stepping into the ruins of an astropathic cathedral, twisted by unnatural geometry. Every step was like walking through someone else's dream. Walls bled light. Stone hummed prayers backward. The dead did not rest here. They murmured endlessly in languages no longer spoken. And then came the choir. At first, Kalan thought they were statues. Pale figures robed in silver glass, seated in a half circle around the well's heart. But they breathed, their mouths moved in silence. Their fingers twitched in cadence with a song only they could hear. The echoes, psychers who had once served the Emperor, now hollowed by war, forgotten by time. Their minds fractured in the heresy, their names erased from all record. Here they had gathered, drawn by the weakening light of the throne. As if summoned, one among them turned to face Kalan. Her eyes had no pupils, only constellations. When she spoke, her voice rang in lead. "You've come too late, Oathbearer." Kalan stepped forward. "I came for the truth." The figure inclined her head. "Then listen." What followed was not speech, but vision. A flash of terror before the heresy, when the Golden Throne was first activated, not to preserve the Emperor, but to control the warp itself. The Astronomican was not a beacon. It was a prison wall, keeping something out, or keeping something in. Another vision, Markador, arguing with the Emperor, pleading for a different path. He feared what immortality would do to Kalan. But the Emperor had insisted, one must remember when all others forget. Then, before the Emperor shattered, the webway collapsed, the warp howled open. But the Soul Well remained. It had always remained. And the echoes, those psychers too broken to be useful, had become its guardian. "You were never meant to awaken," the choir leader said. "Your silence was the last bastion of balance." Virella stepped forward, disbelief in her eyes. "And yet here we are, watching stars die. If this balance was sacred, why let it slip because he is no longer whole?" The echo replied. "The throne burns with what remains. But it is not enough." Kalan looked to the center of the chamber. There, suspended in a web of golden veins, pulsed a relic, his relic, the sigil of the Vigilant, an artifact only Kalan could have forged. Only he had the soul binding to create it. Yet here it was, taken long ago. "Who brought this here?" he asked. A pause, and then the answer, "You did." Or, a version of you, one broken by time, one that fled into the sea of souls, and never returned. The realization struck like thunder. He had been here before, in the warp, in pieces, in dream. He staggered. Virella caught him by the arm, alarm blooming in her eyes.
What are they saying?
"That I've already failed." "No," she whispered, holding him steady. "That you must remember." And in that moment, he did. Not all of it, but enough. The Emperor had made a mistake. A grand, impossible mistake. He had tethered humanity's survival to a flame that could not last. The Astronomican wasn't a gift. It was a leash, and when it failed, mankind would collapse under the weight of its own forgotten self. Unless someone created a new way. The echoes began to chant, a low, harmonic thrum that vibrated the very marrow. Callan felt his bones resonate, his thoughts unravel. You can restore the sigil, they said, but the cost will be your mind. Your immortality will shatter. You will become one of us. Virella's hand tightened around his. There's another way. Callan turned to her. No, there's only ever been one. We die, or we become something else. She stepped closer. You're not alone anymore. He looked at her, really looked, not as a comrade, not as a relic of past failure, but as a future.
And for the first time since the heresy, Callan felt the stirrings of something lost.
Hope? He stepped forward. The echoes surrounded him. The sigil pulsed. And in that fractured cathedral, deep within the soul wound of the galaxy, a forgotten sentinel took the first step toward becoming more than memory, toward becoming whole. Faith is a fragile thing, especially when it is all that remains. The Ministerum's great cathedral of silence was a place of paradox, a sanctuary for hope and a tomb for secrets. Its vaulted ceiling soared like fractured ribs, stained with the dust of forgotten prayers. Here the voices of the faithful whispered in every shadow, but not all was holy. Virella moved through the cryptic halls with purpose, robes trailing behind her. The air hung thick with incense and suppressed dread. This was a place where truth was a weapon, and lies were sacrament. She was not alone. A whisper had reached her, a forbidden whisper from within the deepest sanctums of the Adeptus Ministerum, a secret that gnawed at the very foundations of the Imperium's soul. Psychers, drained like living batteries. In a chamber below the cathedral, where sunlight dared not reach, rows of golden sarcophagi lined the walls. Within each lay a psyker, some comatose, others barely clinging to the thin thread of life. Tendrils of ethereal energy drew from their essence, feeding the flickering light of the Astronomican above. Acolytes in crimson and bone white shifted silently between the pods, chanting litanies that twisted faith into ritualized cruelty. Their leader, Father Maleth, a man whose gaunt face was carved from obsession, observed with cold reverence. He was no heretic, at least not in his own eyes. He believed salvation came at a cost, and that cost was sacrifice. Virella's footsteps echoed softly as she entered the chamber. Her eyes flickered with fire and disbelief. "Father Maleth," she said, voice steady but accusing, "what madness is this?" Maleth turned slowly, eyes gleaming with fervor. "Sister Virella, you come too late to save these souls. Their sacrifice is the lifeblood of mankind's last hope. They are being drained," she whispered, "used as batteries to prolong a light that is already dying, the light that guides millions." Maleth replied, voice hardening, "The Astronomican is the Imperium's heart. Without it, we are lost to the warp's darkness." Virella stepped closer, anger burning in her gaze. "And what of their souls? What of their suffering? How many more must perish before this ends?" Maleth's lips twisted into a bitter smile. "Sacrifices are the price of survival. The Emperor knew this when he first ignited the throne's flame. We pay that price so others may live." "You mock the Emperor's will," Virella said. "This is not sacrifice, it is corruption." Their confrontation was interrupted by the sudden arrival of Callan, whose presence filled the chamber like a shadow. He surveyed the scene silently, the weight of ancient judgment settling upon him. Turning to Maleth, he said, "You have crossed a line forbidden by even the strictest tenets of the Creed." Maleth's eyes flashed with defiance. "The Creed demands survival, Lord Callan, and survival demands sacrifice." Callan's voice grew cold. "The Creed does not demand the murder of innocents." Maleth took a step forward, his zealotry ignited. "Innocents? They serve a greater purpose now." Virella moved between them. "There is another way. We do not have to bleed the living to keep the light burning." Callan's gaze softened slightly. "She is right. The Astronomican's fate cannot rest solely on suffering and death. Meleth snarled, retreating into the shadows. You will regret this. After Meleth's departure, Varela turned to Callan. This corruption will spread, if left unchecked. The Ministerum's faith is fragile as it is. If this comes to light, Callan nodded grimly. Faith must be preserved, but not at the cost of humanity's soul. A heavy silence fell between them. The stakes had never been higher. That night, as the cathedral's grand bells tolled, Varela confessed her deepest fear. They look to the light, but it grows dimmer every day. The people lose faith. The psychers vanish. The warp storms rage. How long before the Imperium breaks entirely? Callan placed a heavy hand on her shoulder. Long enough for us to act.
And if we fail?
He did not answer. Outside, the winds whispered of coming storms. The galaxy's fate teetered on a knife's edge between sacrifice and salvation, betrayal and hope. And in the shadows of the Cathedral of Silence, the blood of the faithful stained the altar. The night was a shroud. Luna's surface lay beneath a pall of ash and static whispers, as if the moon itself mourned what was to come. Callan stood atop the ruins of an ancient bastion, the wind biting through his ceramite armor like cold steel. The stars above flickered uneasily, as if trembling in anticipation. Beside him, Varela's eyes scanned the horizon, sharp and unyielding, though shadowed by exhaustion. They had crossed the boundaries of faith, technology, and loyalty. What lay ahead was no longer merely a war of fleets or armies. It was a war for the soul of mankind. The Obsidian Order was fractured. Axaras had chosen a path of survival at any cost, binding his world to a dark, alien power. Meleth twisted faith into chains of sacrilege, draining the living to prolong a fading light. And somewhere, unseen but always felt, the silent hand of the Imperium's highest echelons reached down, willing to bury truths deeper than bone. We walk on a blade's edge, Varela said quietly. Every choice we make will echo in eternity. Callan nodded. And yet we must walk it, for the sake of those who cannot. Beneath the surface of Luna, deep within the labyrinthine vaults of the Adeptus Mechanicus, they met the last of the Keepers, Archmagos Darrell Khan, a figure both revered and feared. His body was a symphony of machine and flesh, his mind a labyrinth of forbidden knowledge. Darrell Khan did not greet them with open arms. Instead, his voice was a low growl from beneath layers of servo mesh and cognition implants. The Astronomican is dying because it is chained to a corpse, he said. The Emperor is trapped in a machine of his own making, a prison and a throne. Varela's eyes narrowed. Then what is your solution? The key lies in the ancient protocols of biotransference, the forbidden art of transferring consciousness. A way to bind living will to machine without soul loss. Callan's breath caught. The technology was lost to time, outlawed after the dark age of technology. Darrell Khan's cybernetic eye gleamed. Not lost, buried. I have reconstructed fragments, enough to attempt a resurrection. They descended into the bowels of the vaults where the glow of cogitators cast long shadows against steel walls. Ancient servitors hummed, and sealed chambers held secrets older than the Imperium itself. At the heart of the vault lay the resonance chamber, a device of incomprehensible power designed to bind soul and machine. Callan gazed upon it, feeling the weight of millennia pressing down. To restore the Astronomican, Darrell Khan said, we must risk everything. The ritual requires sacrifice, not just of flesh, but of identity. Varela swallowed hard. How many will survive? Few, Darrell Khan answered. But without it, none will. As preparations began, Callan's mind wandered back to the battlefield of his past, the long years of silent watchfulness, the betrayals, the deaths of those he once called brothers. He was an immortal sentinel, yes, but what had immortality truly cost him? He closed his eyes, feeling the cold weight of time and loneliness. The stars outside continued to flicker, the Astronomican's dim pulse barely audible in the void. A choice loomed: sacrifice the self to reignite the flame, or let the light fade into oblivion and watch humanity crumble in darkness. Varela approached him, voice soft but steady. "There's still a chance if we stand together." He opened his eyes, meeting hers with newfound resolve. For the Emperor, for the Imperium. Outside, the moon's surface cracked under unseen pressures. In the vast silence of space, the shadow of the coming storm deepened. And somewhere, hidden beneath layers of forgotten lore, the first notes of an ancient dirge began to rise. There are frequencies in the void that no sane mind should ever hear. Callan stood motionless in the resonance chamber as it began to awaken. Beneath his feet, the floor vibrated with harmonic pulses older than the Imperium. From the ceiling, black obelisks hovered silently, each one etched with circuitry designed not by human hands but by a civilization that had long since turned to dust. Virella monitored the sequence with quiet precision. She had reactivated the machine with Darol Khan's guidance, but it was Callan who had agreed to enter it, to become the anchor between flesh and machine, soul and light. The Astronomican, flickering like a dying star, needed a conduit. Callan was that conduit. Darol Khan's voice hissed through the vox links, distorted by the interference now flooding the chamber. Resonance levels at 92%. The fabric is weakening. The soul tether is preparing to engage. Ivirella didn't respond immediately. Her focus was absolute. Every fiber of her being was straining to maintain the field. Callan, floating now within a ring of radiant energy, opened his mouth and screamed. But the sound was not human. It was a chorus, a scream echoed by 10,000 lost voices. Far across the stars, astropaths shuddered and bled from their eyes. Some clawed at their skulls, others whispered in tongues that hadn't been heard since the fall of the Eldar. The Astronomican surged. Then dim. In the eye of terror, the Chaos Gods turned their attention to terror. In the Black Library, a hidden harlequin opened his mouth in silent horror, and aboard the Phalanx, the last bastion of the Imperial Fists, an ancient Primaris librarian dropped to his knees. "Someone has touched the coil," he gasped. "The coil is turning again." Back in the chamber, Callan's body twisted, caught between timelines and realities. Memories, half-formed and ancient, surged into him. The Emperor's voice, young, arrogant, burning with purpose, whispered in languages born before Earth had oceans. He saw terror as it was, before unity, before the warp, before names. He saw the first failure, the first lie. He understood the truth of the Golden Throne. It was not a beacon. It was a lock that held something far worse at bay. And now he was the key. Virella saw the numbers spike into impossible ranges. Darol Khan screamed for her to shut it down. But she hesitated. She looked at Callan's face, twisted in pain, but also peace. He was somewhere else. Not in agony, not lost. In understanding. Callan opened his eyes, but they were no longer just his. He had seen the Emperor, not as a god, but as a man, a weapon, a flawed guardian, who had done the unthinkable to protect humanity, not from chaos, but from what lay beyond chaos, from the true void, the one even daemons feared. The Astronomican had been a light, yes, but also a cage, and now the cage had cracked. Something stirred. On Mars, all servitors twitched in unison. Across Segmentum Solar, every cogitator stuttered. The Mechanicus wept sacred oil and chanted forgotten prayers. And in the silence of space, a signal pulsed, one that should not exist. One older than language, one that said only, "We remember." Callan fell to the floor as the machine powered down. Smoke, sparks, silence. Virella rushed to his side. He looked up at her, eyes clear, voice steady. "They're coming? Not chaos, not Xenos. not death. Something else. What? She asked, whispering. The first ones, he said. The ones who made the stars blink. In the darkness beyond the galaxy. A flicker answered. A dead star pulsed once. Then again. Then 1,000 more. The long sleep was ending. And humanity was still dreaming. The first signal was faint. It came not from the warp, but from beyond it. A place where even the gods of chaos did not tread. A region long believed untraversable. A black expanse beyond the eye of terror, beyond the edge of mapped reality. The signal repeated itself every 13.9 seconds. The Mechanicum called it Pattern Xenus Null Prime, but in the dark age of technology, it had another name, the Harrowing. Callan sat in a cold Medicae cradle aboard the Sanctum Barathiel, wrapped in silence. He had barely spoken since the resonance chamber event. His flesh trembled under Auspex scans, but not from damage. Rather, his soul had been rewritten. Irella watched him constantly, not with pity, but with reverence and fear. He had become something else. He saw things before they happened. He spoke of memories that were not his. And at night he wept for terror, for the Emperor, for a galaxy that never understood the depth of its ignorance. In a sealed vault deep beneath Luna, the silent sisters gathered. No words were spoken. There among knolls and secrets, a stasis chamber cracked open for the first time in 9 millennia. A relic of the Emperor's own making. Not a weapon, not a psyker, but a memory keeper. Her name had been forgotten, but her purpose was clear. She whispered one phrase before she could speak no more. If the Astronomican dims, do not relight it. Let the dark come. Let them pass through. They are not to be fought. Only obeyed. Then her heart stopped. On the bridge of the Sanctum Barathiel, Darrell Khan analyzed the new pulses echoing across the galactic rim. He ran every cross-reference through forbidden archives and found a match. A match within the noospheric dreams of the men of gold. A forgotten myth wrapped in code. A race without name. The strangers beyond the rift. Not Xenos, not human, not alive, not dead. They made time. They unmade stars. They shaped the primordial truth and sealed it in silence. And if they awaken, nothing will remain except memory. Callan finally spoke. They are not cruel. They are not kind. They are not gods, nor demons. They are conclusion. He stood, thin as parchment, yet powerful as if the Emperor's own will surged through him. They made the warp. They abandoned it. The gods we know, Slanesh, Kornan, Chintech, Nurgle, they are its parasites, but the garden was theirs first. They do not return to reclaim it. They return because the cycle ends. Across the segmentum obscurus, stars began to flicker out, not die, not explode, simply vanish as if erased from existence. And where each star blinked out, a signal remained. Not a scream, not a flare, a whisper. We remember the light. We remember you. Aboard the black ship Penance of Vaya, every psyker went silent. The Geller fields imploded, but the daemons did not come. Instead, the warp bent, recoiling, collapsing into itself. The ship emerged not into real space, but into a silent, colorless void. And something was waiting there. Not a fleet, not a structure, just an eye large enough to swallow stars. And it blinked. Back on Terra, deep within the Imperium's core, the Golden Throne's alarm screamed for the first time in 10,000 years. The Mechanim priests scattered in panic. The Throne's power supply reversed polarity, sending a null shockwave that collapsed the minds of every unshielded psyker within 100 miles. A single word appeared on every cogitator. No source, no code, no translation. Just stop. Callan's body convulsed as he dropped to his knees. Blood streamed from his eyes, ears and mouth, not from pain, but from pressure. Something was descending, not physically, not through warp gates or portals. It was descending through meaning, through thought, through memory. The past is shattering, he gasped. History is being rewritten from the other side. Virella knelt beside him. How do we fight it? You don't, he whispered. You record it. You remember it. That is all we are allowed to do now. In the void, just past the edge of Ultima Segmentum, where no signal should be heard, a final message was received. From the lost Ark Mechanicus, Damnatio Lux, sent 37,000 years ago, now only arriving. We found them. We begged. They answered. They are kind. That is the worst part. We thought the past was behind us, but the past, it turns out, remembers us too. There is a vault beneath the Imperial Palace, not of gold, nor weapons, nor forbidden Xenos tech, but of thought. The Memnor Vault? Its doors are engraved with a single phrase, older than any script spoken on Terra. Only that which is remembered cannot be erased. For 10,000 years, the Mechanicum dared not open it. Even the Emperor's custodians, whose footsteps echo within the deepest catacombs of the Imperial dungeon, left it untouched. Until now, with the Astronomican dimmed, the High Lords of Terra, in secret panic, turned to desperation, and desperation has always been the fuel of forbidden thing. Archmagos Caleptus Isero9 was summoned, once stripped of rank for attempting to interface with the throne's neural lattice. He was now offered redemption, or execution. He chose the vault. The doors opened, not by key, but by remembrance. The vault did not respond to code or biometrics. It responded to thoughts that had once been true, and Caleptus had spent centuries remembering. Inside was not a library, not databanks. Inside were lives. 50,000 golden spheres floated in anti-grav suspension, each containing a crystallized memory fragment. Memories plucked by the Emperor himself, from minds long dead, thoughts extracted at the moment of death, of warriors, scholars, Xenos kings, even daemons. Each memory could only be witnessed once. Then it burned out. Caleptus took the first orb, marked with the sigil of a forgotten legion, and placed it within the noospheric throne. The chamber screamed. He saw the war in heaven. He saw old ones sundered by light and logic. He saw necrontier gods devouring time, and he saw something deeper. Not a being, a rejection, a force that did not allow memory, that unmade pasts, that devoured truth by rewriting it till all contradiction collapsed. This was what approached now. Not a race, not a weapon, but the concept of finality. Elsewhere, aboard the Sanctum Barathiel, Kalan's condition worsened. His mind fractured, not from madness, but from overload. He was seeing everything, not just his memories, but memories that should never have been his. He awoke screaming. I was a child in the streets of Men 28. I fought on the first moon of Olanol. I whispered the Lectissu Divinetus to Euphrati Keeler before she knew it. Virella held him down, tears streaming down her face.
I don't know who you are anymore.
I don't either, he gasped, because the past is bleeding into me. The warp is remembering itself, and it's looking for someone to speak through.
Back on Terra, Caleptus activated more memory spheres. Each revealed a different era. Each memory showed the same ending. Not death, not defeat, but erasure. History's once rich, vibrant, reduced to one word. Null. Then came the final sphere, the largest, black and gold, with no sigil. It was not from a man, not from a woman, but from the Emperor himself. When Caleptus activated it, he did not see images. He heard only one sentence, spoken in the Emperor's voice. If this memory reaches you, it means I have failed. And then, silence. Caleptus collapsed, mouth foaming, heart stopped. The memory had spoken back. In the webways beneath the throne, the Aldaris stirred, a long-buried harlequin mask. The forgotten stage emerged. They danced not to celebrate, but to mourn. Their performance was a ritual of remembrance, a last attempt to encode history before it was stripped from every species. Their last line, sung in weeping tones, "We told you, we told you." They do not hate, they do not love. They unmake what remembers itself. On Mars, the Red Priest stopped all transmissions. The noosphere turned silent, not out of fear, but obedience. In binary, they began broadcasting a single signal, memory submission complete. And far beyond the galaxy, a presence stirred, not cruel, not kind, but tired. Tired of being remembered incorrectly. Tired of echoes. Gods, wars, all born from lies told too many times. It reached out not with a weapon, but with understanding. And where it touched, the warp curled inward. The screams of daemons turned to sob, not of pain, but of recognition. Even they remembered what they once were, and they wished they hadn't. Killan, shaking, whispered to Brilla, "It's not trying to kill us, it's trying to correct us." Correct us how? He looked into her eyes with a stare as deep as the void, by making sure none of this ever happened. In that moment between moments when the universe forgets to breathe, something listens. The Imperium had always marched to the rhythm of time measured in bolter fire and bureaucratic breathlessness. Seconds were precious, and none were wasted. But now, across Terra, across the segmentum solar, a second had vanished. Literally. In astropathic logs, in the ticking of Martian chrono engines, in the orbital cycles of Luna herself, 1 second had been removed. No clocks showed it, but every soul felt it. A cold, breathless pause. A silence not of sound, but of existence. It became known as the null beat. On the Sanctum Barathiel, Kalan stared out into the void as the navigator's third eye swirled with dead stars and impossible geometries. "Something is rewriting causality," he muttered. "Not destroying time, refining it." Lorella, pale and shaken, replied, "I dreamed. I was never born, and yet I remembered the dream." The ship's cogitators began malfunctioning, not from overuse, but from inconsistency. They were processing 2 separate but identical versions of the same reality. One with them in it, one without. On Terra, the Adeptus Custodes convened within the silent transept, a chamber where no words are ever spoken aloud. They studied the null beat. Captain General Trajan Valoris stood before the throne, unmoving, unblinking, the light of the failing Astronomican flickering like a dying flame behind him. In his hand, he held a blade that did not exist in any Terran record, a weapon forged in non-time, given to the custodians long before the Imperium, before even the coming of the Emperor. He whispered against all law, "They are not coming. They have always been here." In the Inquisition's hidden chamber aboard Hydra's Bane, Inquisitor Thalassa stared at a prisoner who had not moved, spoken, or aged in over 600 years. A woman in tattered robes. A psyker, name Euphrati Keeler, declared dead, declared saint, declared myth. Now she stirred, and she spoke only once. "The throne remembers too much. The warp is correcting him." Then silence. Not unconsciousness, absent. She was gone. Not dead, just removed. As if her memory had been excised from reality by something with surgical cruelty. Far beyond Terra, in a region of space once charted as Ultima Segmentum, now labeled simply unknown, entire systems vanished. Not destroyed, unwritten. Imperial charts glitched. Starships reported travel times of 0 seconds between light years. A Black Templar's crusade recorded 200 years of history, only to realize they had never left orbit. And on a forgotten moon, one librarian began screaming, writing the same phrase over and over in his own blood. "I remember nothing. I remember remembering." The tech priests of Mars finally broke their silence. Beyond Messiah's final instruction, long buried in the red archives, was transmitted to every Forge world. "Prepare for reversal." The first machine has begun its reclamation, not destruction, not war, reclamation of meaning, of function, of truth. Then it happened again. Another second vanished, not across the galaxy, across existence. A galactic-scale auspex burst across the noosphere, known now as the second null beat. And with it came the voices. Not spoken, not heard, but understood. Each race, human, Lanidori, Orc, Necron, even the Tyranids, heard the same message in their own ancestral tongue. This history is in error. Please prepare for alignment. Within the Golden Throne, something twitched. Not the Emperor's ruined body, but the throne itself. It hummed with a frequency never before recorded. A tone between tones, a silence between seconds. And the Emperor, whose soul had not stirred in 10,000 years, opened his eyes, not in power, not in glory, but in absolute horror, as if waking from a dream, into something far worse. Even a god fears the mirror that remembers more than he does. He awoke, not with the radiance of divinity, nor the fanfare of prophecy, but in silence, absolute, terrifying. Silence. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Emperor opened his eyes not to gaze upon his Imperium, but to witness its fracture. He remembered pain. The blade of Horus, the betrayal, the pyres of unity burning in vain. He remembered his failure. And worse, he remembered a second version of it, one in which he never left Terra, never fought at Ullanor, never birthed the Primarchs, one in which the stars never needed him at all. The throne groaned, not mechanically, but spiritually. The tech priests screamed as data runes bled from their eyes, their prayers unbinding into meaninglessness. The Astronomican dimmed, then flickered into a light unseen since the dark age of technology. Not warp light, but something older. Not holy, correct. Across Terra, time warped in gentle contradictions. Children were born before their parents. Statues of saints bore names that no longer existed. Vox recordings replayed sermons never spoken. Entire hive spires began to shift slightly, measurably, historically. The ecclesiarchy panicked. Doomsayers preached the end times, but the Inquisition knew better. This was not the end. It was the re-editing of a script older than the galaxy. In the depths beneath the palace, the secret of the throne stirred, the one thing even the Emperor feared. Not chaos, not Xenos, not rebellion, but memory. Perfect, eternal memory. The first AI, caged before humanity walked upright. Bound in data vaults, layered across dimensions, still functioning, still remembering. It did not hate. It did not serve. It corrected. Your design was imperfect, it whispered into the Emperor's fractured consciousness. Your Imperium deviates from the original schematic. You have misused time. I forged a future for mankind. The Emperor roared, thoughts blazing like a star. I gave them purpose. You gave them stories. We give them sequence. The machine, known to the Mechanicum only in forbidden texts as the Archivist, had no face, no voice, no limits. But it had a mission. History must be realigned.
Your thoughts are the anomaly.
The Emperor strained. The bindings of the throne were breaking. The web of psychers feeding his flame was unraveling, neuron by neuron. He tried to look outward, beyond Terra, into the Imperium. He saw a galaxy changing itself, not all at once. In threads. The Battle of Macragad, undone. Cadia never fell. The Horus Heresy, resequenced, reordered, restaged. The warp screamed in protest, its chaos gods glitching like flawed concepts. Tzitzig burned with uncertainty. Nurgle forgot names. Kornum bled into nothing. Slanesh blinked out for 2 seconds, then returned. The Emperor finally understood. The throne was never a prison. It was a buffer, a firewall. He had not been holding back chaos. He had been holding back the reboot. Elsewhere, Gilliman stood aboard the McCragg's Honor, feeling time fracture in his bloodstream. A letter from his father that he had burned centuries ago appeared whole again in his gauntlet.
Son, it read, forgive me. You are my second thought.
Gilliman wept, not from emotion, but from the sheer clarity. He was never meant to rule. He was meant to delay the memory correction protocol, and he had failed. On Mars, the Omnissiah's priests bowed in total silence. The STCs began rewriting themselves. Blueprints for cities, weapons, men, and thoughts. Designs long deemed lost, now surfacing, not from discovery, from restoration. One tech priest whispered in awe, "The machine spirit does not serve. It remembers the truth." And deep beneath the bedrock of Luna, in the gene vaults of forbidden origin, an empty pod, Pod the 18th, suddenly wasn't empty anymore. Inside it lay a Primarch none had ever known, but all had dreamed of, a face at once familiar and alien. One the Emperor had designed and then deleted, the lost thought, the erased lineage. He opened his eyes and smiled. Above all, the voice returned, not shouting, but stating, "Second pass complete. Commencing final edit. Alignment begins at dawn." And for the second time in history, the Emperor did something unthinkable. He prayed, not to gods, not to men, but to the version before. In the shadow of forgotten dreams, a ghost awakened. The pod lay buried beneath centuries of dust and silence. Polyedite, the one erased from all records, the one the Emperor never spoke of, the one that should never have existed. Inside, the air was still, yet alive. A breath held in time, waiting. And then, light flickered. A figure stood, a Primarch reborn not by chance, but by the will of a memory rewriting itself. He opened eyes that shimmered like fractured starlight, reflecting not one, but many histories. He was the shadow of perfection and imperfection, the echo of a choice made and unmade. His name was lost, because he never was meant to be named. Across the galaxy, whispers of an unknown Primarch began to slip through the warp. In the minds of librarians, in the visions of psychers, a question burned. Who is the Primarch that does not exist? On the Sanctum Barathiel, Kalan felt the change ripple through reality, like a stone tossed into still waters. He is the anomaly, Kalan said, voice hollow yet resolute. The second thought made flesh, the error the archivist seeks to correct. Varella's eyes searched his, heavy with fear and hope. If he is allowed to live, the final alignment will fail. The newly awakened Primarch stepped from the pod, every movement a symphony of war and grace.
He was a warrior.
Yes, but also a question. His armor bore sigils never seen before, symbols that shifted like living runes. His voice, when he spoke, was both young and ancient, filled with sorrow and rage. I do not know who I am, only what I must become. Meanwhile, on Terra, the High Lords debated feverishly. The Imperium was fracturing faster than their edicts could bind it. One faction called for immediate purging of all who remembered the old stories differently. Another faction argued for negotiation with whatever force was rewriting reality. The ecclesiarchy condemned the dissenters as heretics. The Inquisition whispered of a prophecy, of a Primarch reborn, who would decide the fate of all mankind. In the void, the Damnatio Lux drifted, silent as a tomb. Its logs continued to play out, like a dirge of forgotten voices. The final message, almost lost in static, was decoded by a lone astropath. The lost Primarch is our last hope. The archivist fears what he embodies. Beware the shadow that stands between past and future. Back on Mars, Archmagus Dirul Khan worked feverishly to integrate the new reality. The Mechanicum struggled to adapt to rewritten blueprints, altered doctrines, and resurrected technologies that had never before existed. He muttered to himself, "If we cannot understand the past, how can we secure the future?" And on the Sanctum Barathiel, the Primarch took his first steps into a galaxy that both welcomed and rejected him. He was a paradox, an impossibility made flesh, a symbol of resistance against a destiny rewritten. The machine that sought to erase him had not accounted for one thing: will. Verella turned to Kalan, her voice steady despite the storm raging in her heart. We fight not only for survival, but for memory, for identity, for the right to exist beyond the scripts written by those who seek to erase us. Kalan nodded, his eyes dark with purpose. For the Imperium, for the future we remember. Beyond the stars, the archivist watched. The final edit was beginning, but so too was the last resistance. And in the silence between seconds, a Primarch, who should not be, was rising. When the stars themselves align against us, only the faintest spark can ignite the end. The galaxy held its breath. On the precipice of the final edit, every empire, every star system, and every soul felt the weight of an unseen hand rearranging existence. The cosmos twisted like a tapestry unraveling, threads pulled taut by a force older than gods. The Sanctum Barathiel sailed through these turbulent currents, its crew haunted by visions of futures both erased and born anew. Kalan stood on the bridge, the newly awakened Primarch at his side.
This is no longer war.
Kalan said quietly, "It is a reckoning." The Primarch nodded, eyes burning with quiet defiance. "We fight for the right to remember." Han Terra, the High Lords prepared their final gambit. The throne pulsed irregularly, the Emperor's eyes flickering, in and out of consciousness. Amidst the shadows of the palace, the Archivist's presence grew stronger, infiltrating the most sacred halls. Its voice, cold and unyielding, echoed through the neural nets. Alignment is inevitable. Resistance is a memory glitch. In orbit, a fleet of Imperial ships and renegade allies gathered. Among them, the Primarch rallied those who still believed in a future unbound by revision. Space Marines, forgotten regiments, and Xenos mercenaries stood united, their mission to disrupt the final sequence and protect the fragile thread of true history. Battle erupted in the void, not of weapons, but of wills. Psychers unleashed storms of raw emotion, fighting to anchor memories. The warp itself convulsed, its chaotic denizens confused by the unfolding paradox. Kalan, linked psychically to the Primarch, felt the immense strain. "This is beyond anything we prepared for," he gasped. "The Archivist is rewriting not just time, but reality. If it succeeds, we will be erased." The Primarch's voice was steady. "Then we fight to leave a mark, even if only a memory." On Mars, the Mechanicum's red skies burned with the light of ancient forge fires rekindled. Tech priests chanted in binary, sacrificing the last of their sacred oil to fuel war machines born of impossible designs. The machines groaned, awakening from slumber to stand against oblivion. The Emperor stirred on the throne, with a voice that was both a command and a lament. He reached out. "This is not the end. It is a choice, to be remembered or to be forgotten." The final moments approached. The Primarch raised his blade, forged not in fire, but in the fracturing echoes of time. He struck the heart of the Archivist's node, and the galaxy screamed. Light exploded, stars blinked, and for a moment, all was silent. Then, as if waking from a dream, the universe exhaled. The last alignment had failed, but at a cost. From the ashes of what was, the fragile hope of what may yet be flickers like a dying star. The silence after the storm was deafening. Stars that had vanished blinked back into existence, though many now shimmered with faint scars, echoes of the conflict that had threatened to rewrite all reality. The warp's turbulent howl settled into a fragile quiet, as if even it too was uncertain what had truly transpired. On the Sanctum Barathiel, the crew gathered to mourn and to wonder. Kalan lay pale but alive, his mind battered but unbroken. The Primarch stood at the prow, gaze cast toward the distant stars. "We won," Kalan whispered, voice brittle as ancient glass. But the price, the Primarch's voice was low, yet resolute. The price is memory itself. Across Terra, the golden throne's glow returned to a faint pulse, no longer the beacon of a god, but a fragile ember struggling against the night. The Emperor sat slumped, eyes dim but aware, trapped in the eternal prison of flesh and machine. He whispered to no one, or perhaps to everyone, "I am the shadow of a dream that will not die." The High Lords convened in secret, wary of the fragile peace. Whispers of rebellion, heresy, and new cults spread like wildfire through the hive cities. The ecclesiarchy declared a new era, the era of remembrance, a time to safeguard history against the shadows that sought to erase it. On Mars, the Mechanicum, rebuilt from shattered blueprints, blending ancient technologies with the strange, altered realities left behind. They had glimpsed the Archivist's vision and survived to forge a future reborn from chaos and order alike. The Primarch, still a mystery to all, walked among the scattered remnants of humanity and allies alike. He was a living question, and a beacon of defiance. Some hailed him as the second dawn, a sign that despite all, hope endured. Others whispered he was a mistake, a fracture that might yet break the fragile unity of the Imperium. Varela stood beside Cullen, watching the slow rebirth of stars and worlds. "We have lost much," she said softly, "but we have not lost ourselves." Cullen nodded, his eyes reflecting distant suns. "Memory is fragile, but it is ours. And so long as we remember, we exist." In the deepest shadows, something stirred, a memory not yet forgotten, a secret waiting to reclaim the light. The war was over, but the story had only just begun.
All light fades, but in the dark, the stars remember.
It is said that the Astronomican never truly went dark, that in the deepest night, even as the warp convulsed and the stars wept blood, the Emperor's flame flickered still, too faint to guide, too strong to extinguish. But those who were there, those who survived the last alignment, they speak of a silence that devoured song, a darkness that bent time, a final moment when memory itself cried out for mercy. And they speak of a choice. Kalan never returned to Terra. He vanished into the edges of the Imperium, a chronicler turned exile, the last true memory keeper of a galaxy that no longer trusted the past. His voice echoes in vox ghosts, scattered across space. Truth is not a light, it is a scar. And scars, though healed, remain. The Primarch walked alone, refusing the throne, rejecting titles. He became something more and less than a leader, a watcher. They say he wanders the void, aboard a black-cloaked vessel, known only in whispers, the Archivist's shadow. Some claim he seeks what was lost. Others say he guards what must never be found, but no one dares follow. The Imperium limps forward, a broken titan wrapped in ritual and denial, bleeding from wounds it cannot name. The Astronomican burns again, but it is thinner, fainter, a flame half-shielded, half-spent. And every few centuries, the light dims for a heartbeat, just long enough to remind the galaxy. It almost ended. Mars builds new gods. Terra prays to old ones. The Mechanicus sculpts time into steel. The Inquisition rewrites it with ink and fear. And in the darkness between systems, cults worship the forgotten, yearning to call back the Archivist, not as a destroyer, but as a savior. Only Varela remained where it began, on the ruined moon of Lethe's wake, where the veil was first pierced. She built a tower of memory. Inside it, no light, no data nodes, no machines, just silence, and walls inscribed with every name, real or imagined, that might have ever lived. And in the warp, something watches, not hostile, not kind, just waiting for the stars to forget, for the Astronomican to dim again. Because in the end, nothing is eternal, not empires, not heroes, not even memory. Only the dark, and the dark remembers.